She was looking for silence. But the moment their eyes met, the world began to speak again. And it wouldn't stop until she listened. Lydia hadn't spoken aloud in 3 days. Not because she couldn't. Because she didn't have to. Silence wasn't just her preference, it was her protection. Her retreat from a world that spoke too much and listened too little. After the divorce, the job loss, and the late-night phone call she still refused to name, Lydia had packed what she could into a storage unit, handed over the keys to her apartment, and driven until the cell signal dropped. That had been 4 weeks ago. The cabin wasn't hers, not really. It had belonged to her uncle, a forest ranger who disappeared in the Yukon nearly a decade ago. When the paperwork came through stating that he was legally declared dead, the land had defaulted to her. No one else wanted it. And Lydia was grateful. The silence here wasn't empty. It was clean. Snow muffled everything. Pine needles caught what little wind passed. Even her own thoughts seemed quieter in the mountains. Each morning, she'd make tea in a chipped enamel mug, sit by the window, and stare out at the trees, waiting for nothing. That was the point. Nothing happened here. And for someone trying to forget, that was perfect. But that morning, something changed. It started like all the others. She woke early, before dawn, when the world was still blue. Boiled water. Sipped slowly. Then slipped on her boots and coat to make the slow trudge into town, a 40-minute drive down winding, snow-covered roads. She didn't speak to anyone there either. Just nodded, handed over cash, packed up her supplies. She was halfway back when she saw it. A shadow in the snow. Small. Low to the ground. She slowed instinctively. Thought it was a fox at first. Then a coyote. Then she saw its eyes. The puppy sat just off the roadside, where the snow met the tree line. His fur was dark, with a streak of white along his chest and a single tan spot above his right eye. He didn't move when the SUV rolled to a stop. Didn't flinch when Lydia stepped out. Didn't whimper or bark. Just looked at her. Straight through her. She crouched slowly. "Hey there." Her voice cracked, rough from disuse. The puppy tilted his head slightly. Still silent. Still staring. Then something happened. Not externally. Internally. A shift. A pressure behind her ribs. A memory she didn't recognize, like the taste of a dream fading before full recall. Tears filled her eyes without reason. She reached out a hand. The puppy took a step forward. Then another. And placed his paw on her palm. She didn't know how long she stayed there like that, kneeling in the snow, hand wrapped gently around a creature who hadn't made a single sound. But eventually, her knees ached. And he didn't resist when she lifted him into her coat. Back at the cabin, she made a bed near the fire from an old towel and fleece jacket. He curled into it as if he'd always lived there. She checked for a tag. A collar. Any sign of ownership. Nothing. Just soft fur and that unwavering gaze. When he slept, he twitched and whimpered, dreams chasing him through whatever memories he carried. She didn't ask questions. She didn't name him. It wasn't time yet. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her ears strained for the usual silence. But it wasn't there. The wind whistled oddly. Floorboards creaked like they were trying to speak. She thought she heard the puppy pacing, but when she checked, he was still asleep. Then, just after midnight, her phone, the one she never turned on anymore, lit up. No signal. No notifications. Just a lock screen glowing faintly. She stared at it for a long time. There was no reason it should have turned on. But there it was. And on the screen, a background photo she didn't remember choosing. A snowy forest. With two shadows in the snow. One of them was clearly the puppy. The other, she didn't want to think about. She turned the phone off, put it in the drawer, and sat by the fire until morning. The puppy never stirred. But he watched. Even with eyes closed, she felt it. And the silence? It was no longer quiet. Not anymore. Not since that one glance. Open. The cabin had always creaked. That was just part of it. Old wood, shifting temperatures, the natural sounds of wilderness settling into its bones. But the morning after the puppy arrived, the creaks changed. They sounded more deliberate. Like footsteps. Not heavy, but paced. Timed. Lydia had always been logical. Even in grief. Even in trauma. But she wasn't naive. She knew her own mind had teeth. She chalked it up to lack of sleep. Maybe the weird phone glitch had just unnerved her. Maybe her brain, deprived of stimulation for too long, was inventing friction. But then the photo fell. She was making tea. Back turned. Nothing touching the walls. Nothing on the shelves. Just silence, the familiar kind. Then, a sharp crack behind her. Glass. She spun. Her uncle's ranger photo, the one she'd carefully centered on the wall weeks ago, lay face down on the floor, glass spiderwebbed with cracks. She set the mug down and picked it up. Nicked her thumb on the frame. Felt the blood bead and run down her wrist. And then, she looked at the puppy. He was standing now. No longer dozing near the fireplace. Standing between her and the wall. Staring directly at the photo in her hand. No growl. No whimper. Just waiting. Lydia set it on the table and wrapped a tissue around her finger. The puppy stepped forward, sat at her feet, and leaned gently into her leg. And again, the weight behind her ribs returned. Later that day, she tried to go outside. She needed to clear her head, maybe shovel some of the walk before the snow piled up again. The puppy sat at the door. Wouldn't move. Not growling. Just blocking. She bent down, tried to guide him aside. He leaned into her hand, then looked up. And in that moment, that exact moment, she heard it. A voice. Clear. Young. Don't go out yet. Wait. She jerked her hand back. The puppy stayed where he was. Still watching. She stared at him. No, she whispered. Nope. I didn't hear that. She grabbed her boots, pulled them on, and gently nudged the puppy aside. He let her. But as she opened the door, the wind howled in so suddenly that it knocked over the mug she'd left on the counter. Smashed it across the floor. She froze. Looked out. White everywhere. But something about the woods looked wrong. Too still. Like everything was holding its breath. She closed the door. The wind died instantly. Behind her, the puppy had laid back down. But his eyes never closed. That night, she dreamed. Not her own memories, but something else. She was in the woods. Snow knee-deep. Heart pounding. But she wasn't alone. She could feel fur against her leg. Warm breath in her palm. Then a voice, this time a man's. He remembers more than you do. She turned. And woke. The fire was almost dead. The cabin was cold. But she was sweating. The puppy was sitting inches from her face, watching. As if waiting for her to wake up. As if he knew. She sat up slowly, running a hand through her hair. Her phone buzzed. She hadn't turned it on. She hadn't touched it. She pulled it from the drawer. Screen glowing. One new voicemail. No number. No message content. Just the alert. She tapped it. Played the message. Static. Then breathing. Then, a familiar sound. A bark. A sharp, single bark that echoed like it had come from right outside the door. Then silence. The voicemail ended. The puppy got up. Walked to the back door. Saturday. Waited. Lydia stood on shaky legs. Followed him. Looked out through the window. Nothing. Only snow. Trees. And in the center of the yard, something new. A paw print. Just one. Pressed deeply into the fresh snow. Facing the cabin. She closed the curtain. Turned around. And the puppy wasn't there anymore. She panicked, rushed through the living room. Then spotted him, curled up beside her bed, already asleep. Had he even moved? Or had something else? She sat beside him. Pulled the blanket over her legs. Laid back against the wall. And for the first time in weeks, she whispered aloud. Okay. Not to him. Not to herself. To the quiet. To the memory rising. To whatever it was that had been knocking at her ribs since the moment they locked eyes. Okay, she repeated. I'll listen. She closed her eyes. And this time, she didn't dream. She remembered. Lydia didn't sleep long after that. She woke up just before sunrise, her hands still cold even under the blankets. The cabin air had dipped to freezing. The fire had died out again. But her thoughts were burning. She kept seeing the paw print in the snow, perfectly formed, facing inward. 1. Not 5 like you'd expect from a scampering puppy. Not a trail. Just one. Like someone, or something, had stepped up to the edge of her world and knocked. She made tea, pacing the kitchen. The puppy stirred but didn't rise. Not until she went to the small storage trunk near the bookshelf, the one that had belonged to her uncle. She hadn't touched it since arriving. Didn't think she needed to. But now, her hands moved with a sense of certainty she didn't understand. She undid the latch and lifted the lid. Dust lifted. Inside, mostly ranger supplies. Maps. Compasses. An old flare gun. But at the bottom, something strange. A cloth-wrapped bundle. She unwrapped it. Inside was a stack of notebooks. And between them, a faded photograph. Her uncle. Standing outside a ranger outpost. A child beside him, a girl maybe 10. And a puppy in her arms. The puppy looked identical to the one currently chewing a corner of the rug. The same fur pattern. The same eyes. The same glance. Lydia dropped to her knees, the photo shaking in her hands. She flipped the photo over. In her uncle's familiar scrawl. Pine Bend, 97. Memory comes back in silence. She stared at it. Memory comes back. The puppy walked to her then. Sat down. Looked up at her like he already knew. She reached for one of the notebooks. Opened the first page. It was a journal. Her uncle's field entries. Most were weather reports and wildlife sightings. But near the end, the tone shifted. The same puppy again. Every 10 years, give or take. Different child. Same eyes. Same behavior. Same silence. Another entry. They always find someone grieving. Someone quiet. It's not random. It's remembrance. I've stopped trying to explain it. I've started listening. She swallowed hard. Flipped further. The last page. Pine Bend has answers. But I was told not to go back. Not after what happened to Lena. She saw too much. She heard it. And it never left her. Lydia didn't know who Lena was. But she suddenly knew she had to go to Pine Bend. The outpost in the photo. The place her uncle feared. She packed lightly, layers, maps, the journal, water. and food for the puppy, who now trotted after her like he'd always known this was where it was headed. The snow had lightened, and the trail toward the forest had begun to show beneath the white. She followed old footprints. Deer maybe. Then rabbit. Then dog. Too large for the puppy. Too sharp to be hers. By mid-morning, she reached the first trail marker, a rusted metal sign hidden beneath pine branches. Pine Bend, 2.4 miles. It leaned like it had been forgotten. Lydia stood still. Her breath came in clouds. The wind shifted behind her. But she didn't turn. She knew the forest was watching now. Not in menace, in memory. Half an hour in, the trees grew denser. The trail narrowed. But the puppy never hesitated. He paused now and then, sniffing at bark, at roots, at buried logs. Sometimes he looked back to make sure she was still with him. Sometimes she wasn't sure he was still with her. Like he flickered at the edge of memory. At one point, they came upon a tree with deep scratch marks across its bark. 3 vertical slashes. Old. Weathered. Intentional. Below it, a tiny tag nailed to the trunk. Brass. No words. Just a spiral etched into the metal. A symbol. The puppy stared at it for a long time. Then walked on. She followed, heart pounding. It didn't feel like hiking anymore. It felt like returning. To something she'd never personally known, but that part of her had once lived. Finally, the forest opened. A small clearing. And at the far end, a weather-worn wooden structure. 1 story. Collapsed in places, but standing. She recognized the windows. The steps. The broken lantern by the door. The outpost. Pine Bend. She stood in the clearing, too scared to move forward. The puppy didn't wait. He walked up to the porch and sat. Waited. When she finally crossed the threshold, the air changed. Colder. Still. Like stepping into someone else's story. Inside, the dust lay thick on everything. But someone had been there. Recently. Boot prints. A half-burned candle. A cup beside the sink. Not her uncle's. Too recent. Too neat. She checked the small back room. There, against the wall, stood a corkboard. And on it, pinned pages. Photos. Drawings. Puppies. Children. Trees. Maps. And in the center, her. A photo she didn't remember being taken. She was sitting on the porch of her cabin. The puppy beside her. Taken from a distance. Unmistakable. Dated 3 days ago. She staggered back. The puppy came beside her. He nudged her hand. And when she looked into his eyes, again, she saw something more. Something older. Something that whispered. We're not alone. She turned to the window. Something moved in the trees. Too fast to see clearly. But it was there. Watching. Waiting. Not threatening. Just remembering. The folder was heavier than it looked. Not in weight, but in presence. Lydia pulled it from the corkboard carefully, the rusted pushpins snapping free with quiet pops. The cover was stiff, the manila yellowed and water-stained. The title, stamped in bold, black ink, was both ordinary and terrifying. The Glance Protocol. Pine Memory Field Research, Observational Draft, 1996 to 2002. Restricted, do not duplicate. Below that, a red label handwritten in thick marker. Return to Unit 3 or destroy. Lydia opened it with hands she couldn't stop from shaking. Inside, reports, photographs, clipped interview transcripts, and something she wasn't expecting, letters. pages and pages of them. Addressed not to researchers, not to supervisors, but to the dogs. Each one had a name. Finn, Hazel, Bowie, Lark, Sedge. Some written by children, some by adults. They weren't scientific. They were confessional. I saw her again last night. In the dream. You remember, don't you, Bowie? You saw her too. Hazel, thank you for staying. Even after the accident. I know you were afraid. I was too. They said you were just a projection, but I know better. You kept the worst part of me safe. Lydia flipped faster. More and more pages. Reports labeled PSI Delta Echo Effect, Caretaker Collapse, Cross-Memory Contamination. Words she didn't understand. But then came the key. A plain sheet. No header. Just typed lines. The glance protocol is not about vision. It is about recognition. A puppy does not remember names. It remembers feeling. If a bond is strong enough, the look is all it takes. One glance. And everything comes back. She looked at the puppy. He sat quietly, watching her read, his eyes deep and ancient and steady. Had he remembered her? Or someone else? Had he come because of who she was now? Or who she had been before? She dug deeper into the folder. A transcript jumped out at her. Subject, Lena R. Age, 9. Interview date, May 1998. Handler, W. Mercer. M. Do you remember where Bowie came from? L. No. He came after the fall. M. Do you remember the fall? L. No. But Bowie does. That's why he doesn't like stairs. M. And what happens when you look into his eyes? L. I hear my mom's voice. M. But your mother? L. She's dead. But Bowie remembers her. M. And when he looks at you? L. He sees everything I want to forget. Lydia sat down hard on the creaky wooden floor. The puppy came to her side. Curled into her lap. Soft. Warm. Grounding. This wasn't a myth. It wasn't folklore. This had been a study. Funded, hidden, buried. Her uncle had known. Had watched it happen. Had tried to stop it. Or been part of it. She returned to the corkboard. At the bottom was a photo she hadn't noticed earlier. It was clipped sideways under a pile of loose papers. She freed it and turned it upright. It was blurry, taken from a distance, but her chest clenched the moment she saw it. Her uncle. Standing with another man, tall, pale, sharply dressed in a gray coat, beside a child. That child. Her hair. Her eyes. It was her. No. It couldn't be. The back of the photo read. L. Madsen Intake, 1995. Echo imprint possible. Handler reassigned after contact failure. Subject removed April 2nd, 96. Lydia's vision blurred. Her heart pounded in her ears. The world swam. She didn't remember any of this. She shouldn't have remembered any of this. But her uncle had brought her here. Had hidden her. Had rescued her. And the puppy. Had followed. Through time? Through lineage? Through memory. She stumbled toward the old desk in the corner. Pulled open drawers blindly. Found another notebook, leather-bound. Newer. Inside, one page. I couldn't stop them all. But I stopped hers. If she finds him again, if he remembers, the silence will break. And she'll hear what I never could. The glance isn't magic. It's return. She closed the notebook. looked at the puppy. Whispered, "What do you see when you look at me?" He didn't answer. But he lifted his head. Met her eyes. And something moved inside her. A sound. Not out loud. Inside. A child's voice. Her own voice. "Don't let them take him. He remembers Mom." Tears broke loose before she knew she was crying. The puppy stood. Licked her face. And walked toward the door. She followed him. Outside, the air had changed again. The sky darker. Clouds heavy. Wind picking up. And in the far tree line, movement. 3 figures. Approaching. Deliberate. She froze. Not rangers. Not hikers. Clothed in dark, featureless winter gear. One raised a hand. Not waving. Signaling. The puppy didn't bark. Didn't growl. But his body pressed against Lydia's leg. Like a shield. She backed into the cabin. Heart thudding. They were here. Whoever they were. Not memories. Not echoes. People. Real. And they'd followed the thread. Back to her. Back to the puppy. Back to the glance. She stepped inside, latched the door, and turned off the lantern. The cabin dimmed. The puppy didn't move. He just watched the door. Unblinking. Lydia whispered into the darkness. "I remember." And behind her ribs, something opened. Something old. Something waiting. And the world, again, was not quiet. They didn't speak at first. The 3 figures stopped at the edge of the clearing. Still. Silent. Patient. The puppy didn't move from Lydia's side, but his body leaned subtly forward, alert. Then, the middle figure took one slow step forward and raised both hands, palms out. Not surrender. Not threat. Recognition. Lydia exhaled. Her breath fogged the air. "What do you want?" she asked. Her voice cracked. The first words she'd spoken out loud since whispering, "I remember." The figure on the left, smaller, maybe a woman, stepped forward and lowered their hood. A face. Familiar. Not from life. From a photo. From the corkboard. From the journal. Lena. She was older now, late 20s perhaps, but her eyes were unmistakable. She looked at Lydia with cautious awe. "You made it back," she said softly. "I didn't know I'd left," Lydia replied. The third figure moved forward and handed Lydia a sealed envelope. Worn edges. Marked only with a symbol, the spiral etched into the brass tag on the tree. She opened it slowly. Inside, a single sentence. "He carries what you buried. And you carry what he lost." Below it, a drawing. A cabin. A forest. 2 shadows, a girl and a dog, standing at the edge. Watching. Lena stepped forward. "We've been following you since he found you." Lydia narrowed her eyes. "You sent him?" Lena shook her head. "He chose you." A long silence passed. Then Lydia stepped off the porch. The puppy followed. Lena gestured toward the woods. "There's a place we keep, for those who remember. For those who carry the echoes." She looked down at the puppy. "He's one of the last from the original line." "The original what?" Glan sponded. "Memory tide. They called them many things. But we just say, the ones who remember." Lydia looked back at the cabin. The outpost. The map. The pages. All of it real. All of it waiting. "I need to know everything," she said. Lena nodded. "Then you'll come with us." Lydia hesitated. But the puppy nudged her leg gently. She looked into his eyes. The memory, the voice, came again. You're safe when he watches. He doesn't forget. She turned back to Lena. Let's go. They moved into the woods, 5 shadows now. 1 human less than before. 1 memory more. Snow fell again. And the world, for the first time in years, was alive with sound. Whispers of pasts unlived. Dreams untied. And beneath it all, the quiet footfalls of those who remember. The trail Lena led them down wasn't marked on any map. It twisted between trees Lydia didn't recognize, even though she was sure she'd passed this way before. The deeper they went, the quieter the forest grew, not silent, but full of a hush that felt intentional. Like the woods themselves were listening. The puppy stayed close to her, never straying far. He didn't pull or lag. He guided. After nearly an hour, the trees opened into a wide bowl of land beneath a granite overhang. And there, tucked between shadow and snow, lay a small settlement. Cabins. Tents. A fire pit. A barn. A windmill turning slowly. And people. Not many. A dozen maybe. Some standing, some seated by the fire, others walking slowly between buildings. All of them turned to look as the group emerged. No one shouted. No one pointed. They simply acknowledged. One woman stepped forward. Mid-40s. Silver hair in a braid. A golden retriever walked beside her. Limping. Eyes cloudy. But when it looked at Lydia, it froze. Then lowered its head. And whimpered. The woman knelt beside it. She remembers you, the woman said. Lydia blinked. We've met? The woman shook her head. Not you. Her. She touched the puppy with the back of her hand. Your dog isn't from here. Neither are you. They walked Lydia through the camp. Showed her the main lodge. A warm kitchen. A library. A map room. Dozens of photographs on a central wall. Children with dogs. Adults in uniforms. A few faces Lydia recognized. Lena pointed to one. Her uncle. He helped us hide what they tried to erase. They called the place sanctuary. No other name. No signs. No roads in. It was a place for the bonded. For those who heard what no one else did. For the ones whose memories were too heavy to carry alone. Lydia was one of them. She always had been. That night, she sat by the fire with Lena. The puppy at her side. And she asked the question that had haunted her since the moment he looked at her. Why me? Lena stirred the coals. Because you broke through. Without training. Without tools. Just heart. That's rare. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Handed it to Lydia. Another drawing. A child with a dog, standing in snow. Below it, one word. Return. The puppy pressed into Lydia's side. She closed her eyes. And for the first time in years, she didn't dream. She remembered. Not pain. Not fear. But love. And it was loud. Lydia wasn't ready to leave the sanctuary. She didn't want to. But she also couldn't pretend what was coming wasn't real. The warning came at dawn. A raven, one of theirs, returned with a red thread tied to its leg. That only meant one thing. Visitors. Unwelcome ones. The council met in the map room before sunrise. Lena brought Lydia along. You're part of this now, she said. The table was scattered with ink trails, signal flags, and old data maps. And something else. A small device, blinking red. GPS. We found it buried under your outpost, Lena explained. Lydia froze. She hadn't placed it. Someone had followed. Had known. Had marked her. One of the elders, a soft-spoken man named Harrow, looked up. They want him back, he said, gesturing to the puppy. They always want them back. Lydia clenched her fists. Then we don't let them take him. Harrow nodded. Agreed. But this time, they won't stop at him. The puppy stood. Walked to the window. Saturday. Watching. Waiting. Lydia crossed the room and knelt beside him. We won't run, she whispered. Not this time. He licked her hand. The air around them shifted. The silence was about to break again. And this time, everyone would hear it. They called it the memory wall. Not because it stored memories. Because it was made of them. Etched into the wood, layer over layer, were names. Symbols. Lines of forgotten handwriting. Scratches made by tiny claws. And below it all, something older. Deeper. Lydia stood before it now, the puppy warm against her chest. Lena spoke softly behind her. Everyone who has come through Sanctuary has touched this wall. Every bond. Every fracture. Every memory made visible. Lydia traced one name with her fingers, Ada. A swirl beside it. And 3 claw marks. The puppy pressed into her. She felt a pulse of warmth in her palms. Like touching the wall woke something. Harrow stepped beside them. He held out a box. Inside were collar tags. Dozens of them. Engraved. Weathered. Precious. He picked one out. Held it up to the candlelight. Lydia read the name aloud. Bowie. Harrow nodded. The first known glance bond. Each tag had a story. Not all ended well. Some ended before they began. But all of them remembered. And that remembering, Lena said, is what they feared most. They? Lydia asked. Lena answered. The ones who tried to silence the past. Who thought memory was a liability. Not a lifeline. They weren't just coming for the puppy. They were coming for the whole lineage. To erase what these dogs carried, what they were. Lena led Lydia to the end of the wall. Blank space. Not much left. But enough. She handed Lydia a small carving tool. This space is for the new bonds. Those who survive. Lydia looked at the wood. Then at the puppy. Then, slowly, she carved. Lydia plus? She paused. Looked to Lena. I never named him. The puppy tilted his head. Lydia whispered, Do you remember your name? He stepped forward. Nudged one tag off the wall. It clinked to the floor. Lydia picked it up. The tag read, Echo. Her breath caught. Echo, she said aloud. He wagged his tail once. Then sat. Like it had always been true. Like it was time to come back. She finished the carving. Lydia plus Echo. The wall shimmered briefly, a trick of light, or something more. Harrow placed the tag beside their names. Lena stepped back. You've joined the memory. Later that night, as the fire dimmed, Lydia sat alone in the cabin. Echo lay across her feet. She reread the letter Harrow had given her hours before. To erase a memory is to risk losing yourself. To share one is to multiply it. The glance is not sight. It is return. A noise outside. A crunch of snow. Lydia froze. Echo lifted his head. Then the bell by the path rang once. The signal. One sound. Then silence. Visitors. Again. But this time, Lydia didn't tremble. She stood, Echo at her side, and opened the door. Light spilled across the snow. Two figures. Not the same as before. Younger. One held a small bundle. Shivering. Whimpering. A puppy. The girl holding it whispered, "He won't look at anyone else." But when he saw me, he stopped crying. Lydia knelt. Echo stepped forward. The puppy met his eyes. And didn't blink. "Come inside," Lydia said. "We have room on the wall." The noise started low. A hum. Then a static buzz. Then voices. Not loud. Not real. Not yet. Echo stood alert, eyes toward the east trail. Lydia clutched the girl's shoulder. The girl held the puppy tight. Everyone else emerged slowly from the cabins. The whole sanctuary. Hearing it too. The elders gathered. Harrow carried an old radio, analog and cracked. Lena checked the perimeter map. But Lydia already knew. "They're here." From the trees came 3 trucks. Dark. Unmarked. Slow. One stopped just at the tree line. 2 figures exited. No weapons drawn. But they didn't need to. The silence was pressure enough. The taller figure stepped forward. Lydia recognized the walk. She stepped toward him. Echo followed, pressed to her side. The man pulled off his gloves. Then his hood. Lydia stopped cold. Her uncle. Alive. But older. Scarred. Changed. "Lydia," he said. Her voice barely worked. They said." "I had to disappear," he said. "To keep the memory safe." She blinked. "You were one of them." "I was. Until I saw what they did." He gestured to Echo. "He came from my last post. I sent him to find you." She shook her head. "Why now?" "Because the archive is burning. They're erasing every trace of the bonds. Every dog. Every child who saw too much. And you." He stepped closer. "You're the last connection. You and him." Echo growled low. Her uncle stopped. "I didn't come to take him. I came to show you where they're going next." He handed her a slip of paper. A location. A date. Then another. A photograph. Of her. An Echo. Surrounded by strangers. Watching. "They're rewriting what you are." Lydia trembled. But she didn't back down. The entire sanctuary stood behind her now. Dozens of eyes. An Echo. The quiet guardian. "We won't run." Her uncle nodded once. Then backed away. He turned. And disappeared into the woods. No trucks followed. No sound. Just wind. And the weight of what came next. The silence finally broke. And it was full of everything they'd tried to forget. They left before dawn. No goodbyes. Only nods. Silent blessings. Echo's paw print pressed into Lydia's palm one last time. The sanctuary would hold. But what was coming wouldn't stop there. And Lydia had seen it now, the archive, the fire, the falsified photos. If the past vanished, they'd never find their way back. Echo led the way. Through ravines. Over frozen streams. Past places Lydia had only seen in dreams. He didn't bark. Didn't whine. But his pace never slowed. Because he remembered. Because that's what he was made to do. They reached the edge of the map. The place her uncle had marked. It looked like nothing, rocks, ice, brush. But Echo stopped. waited, then scratched the snow. Lydia helped him dig. Beneath the ice, stone steps. Leading down. A door. Rusted. Locked. Marked with the same spiral carved into the memory wall. She held up the medallion from Harrow's desk. It clicked. The door opened. The scent of time rushed out. Inside, silence. Then lights, slow and dim, powered by a solar battery untouched by snow. A corridor. A vault. A wall of drawers. Files. Recordings. Drawings. And in the center, a cradle. Too small for a child. Just the right size for a pup. Echo walked straight to it. Curled inside. And whimpered. Lydia opened the file beside it. Her name. Her photo, younger, 6 years old. Next to her, Echo. Smaller. Rounder. But same eyes. Same connection. The caption read. Subject 12A. Bond successful. Memory retrieval confirmed. She read page after page. They'd tested her. Then made her forget. But Echo hadn't. He never forgot. A final page. Subject escaped. Guardian released. Risk, total exposure. Below that, a redacted signature. But Lydia knew the handwriting. Her mother's. She sat hard on the floor. The world tilted. She remembered the woman who sang to her in a storm. Who whispered, "If you forget, he will remember for both of us." Lydia cried for the first time in years. Echo jumped up. Pressed into her side. He licked the tears. Then pawed the cradle. Underneath, a case. A drive. A map. A list of names. The last archive. What the fire hadn't yet reached. Lydia took it. Packed it in her satchel. Looked around once more. Then closed the cradle lid. Not to bury. To preserve. They weren't the last. Not anymore. They stepped outside. The wind stronger now. But Lydia stood taller. The girl with the broken past was gone. The guardian had done his job. Now she would do hers. Back at the sanctuary, the wall waited. Blank space beside her name. New names would follow. Because of Echo. Because of her. Because memory, once awakened, doesn't sleep again. They walked into the snow. Side by side. Silent. And never alone.